Hello, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Dina McFeeters, and I'm honored to serve as Associate Minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all that you are carrying with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests joining us today. If you're visiting for the first time or joining us from afar, why don't you say hello in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from? I welcome you to our worship service today by inviting you to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Let's return to our beloved sanctuary for the lighting of the flaming chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Most Unitarian Universalists have at least a passing acquaintance with our UU principles, but how many of us are aware of our UU sources? If you look at the table of contents in our teal hymnal, you'll see that the hymns are organized into 6 different sections based on our 6 UU sources, which are Transcending Mystery and Wonder, Words and Deeds of Prophetic People, Wisdom from the World's Religions, Jewish and Christian Teachings, Humanist Teachings, and Earth-Centered Traditions. This is a wide-ranging list of sources for music and words that can nurture our spirits, engage our minds, and inspire action. Why is the list so broad? Because our roots in universalism claim that revelation is ongoing. The search for truth and the finding of truths that resonate with our experience is a lifelong journey of development. Our roots in Unitarianism claim that there is a unity that underlies all our journeys and all our truths. There is a deep wellspring from which we draw life. When the chaos of the world is swirling around us, when we lose touch with our center, when tragedy strikes, when we don't know what we believe, when we are lost and can't find our way home, the 6 UU sources are a treasure trove of wisdom and guidance to support us. Perhaps one of the UU sources speaks particularly to you. We launched a new adult spiritual development group at First Church last August called Our Wellspring. It's a program that was created by UUs to support our theological questions and our desire for spiritual practice and personal transformation. Here's the description from the program's website. Our Wellspring is a 10-month spiritual deepening course. Group members experience deep listening and spiritual reflection in a small group format. Participants read, view, and respond to pre-session assignments that are focused on spiritual topics and UU theology. The group is facilitated by 2 church members, and they meet twice a month. A sense of personal purpose and meaning arises from UU Wellspring's unique combination of spiritual practices, spiritual companionship, readings, and heart-opening sessions. a sustaining joy emerges while deepening commitment to make change in ourselves and our world. How is this different from theme circles, which we already offer at First Church? UU Wellspring Sources offers a deeper dive into spiritual themes and topics, grounded in UU theology and history. The Sources group has a bigger commitment with more homework as you explore all 6 UU sources, and it centers daily spiritual practice. UU minister Marjorie Bowen-Sweetley wrote, "If I have any advice for those struggling to discover their own truths, it is found in the ancient wisdom of a Sufi parable. If you want to move beyond a surface understanding of any religious tradition, you've got to dig a well as deep as the self. You have to go into the depths of that tradition if you are to find the living water that awaits your thirst." Stated differently, find a religious path, any path, and go as deeply as you can to understand and embrace it fully. The 5 participants from this year's UU Wellspring Sources group at First Church did just that, and they will share their reflections with you today.
Several years ago, I was contacted by someone at the UU West Church to be put on a list of local spiritual directors for their UU Wellspring program. I did that and became really curious about something that was being offered in a UU church that encouraged people to sit with a spiritual director. Over the years, Reverend Dean and I talked about UU Wellspring, considering when it was a good time to bring it to First Church. We decided to give it a try for this past church year in the midst of a pandemic where everything church-related was virtual. Not an easy undertaking. In preparation for today's service, I went back to my sources journal notes from this past year for the things that stood out, and here are some of them. During the opening retreat, I took notes about my greatest fear, which was, what if we build it and they don't come? They did come. And we gathered throughout this past church year, carrying whatever was going on in the world and our lives into our circle, being uplifted with the sharing and connection that took place. In our retreat, we were invited to write something on a small stone to carry with us for the year. I wrote, "Trust my heart." That has become a touchstone for me, and I often hold it in my hand while in a group. It reminds me of what's important. In our covenant building session, this is what we agreed to. In this Wellspring group, we will honor our time, create sacred space, be here now, solve problems together. In our session on listening to our own prophetic voices, we were invited to watch the video of the TED Talk of Brene Brown on vulnerability. The notes that I took from that are as follows. Connection is why we're here. It gives meaning and purpose to our lives. Vulnerability means you have to allow yourself to be seen. Courage is about the courage to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. Connections are a result of that authenticity. And what makes you vulnerable makes you beautiful. A particular time when I experienced my courage and vulnerability in this group was in the session on death and dying. The question was, what do you believe happens after death? And I shared something that some people might think is kind of woo-woo. After my partner Bruce died, I found solace in thinking that I would see him again after I die. And the ways that I see him in small things, like finding pennies. In the session where we explored the Jewish and Christian teachings, there was information about Tikkun Olam, a Jewish concept of repairing the world. This was incredibly meaningful to me. Here are some of my notes from this teaching. Our mission is to gather the holy sparks of light that are within our domain and to use them to repair this broken and hurting world that desperately needs love and healing. We must begin by healing ourselves and our relationships. And we begin first by owning the power within us to bring about positive change. I have come to realize that part of my work in repairing the world is to offer circles where people gather to connect, to share, and to help find purpose and meaning in their lives with whatever is going on. That is what the Year of Doing Sources was for me, with my courageous, vulnerable, authentic, beautiful companions, and I hope for them as well. We plan to offer this again in the upcoming church year, the hope being if we build it, you will come. Here's one more quote from my journal, from Ram Dass. At the end of the day, we are all just walking each other home. I invite you to consider joining us next year in this journey of connection, learning about the sources of our UU faith, finding meaning and purpose, and maybe laughing, maybe crying, and walking each other home together. Maybe even repairing the world. For me, it doesn't get much better than that.
When I was a boy, each week on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And when I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad, miracles don't happen still. Now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at home. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips, but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Child's face, say it's not a testament, that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament, I tell you that it can't be This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Many Unitarians struggle with words like faith or soul or prayer, myself included. I partook in the Wellspring session, and one of the things that I gained from it was an understanding about my belief that everyone matters, or you might say the inherent worth and dignity of every person. What I came to realize through one of our discussions was that I believe this unshakably. Nothing can convince me otherwise. And I cannot prove that it is true. And looked at it the right way, this then became for me an article of faith, something that I believe and yet cannot prove. And that gave me a broader, maybe a richer understanding of what faith might mean to people, Unitarians, and in other faiths. So for that reason alone, I got a great deal out of the Wellspring experience.
Good morning. My name is Amy Wilborn. I joined Wellspring this year to deepen my spiritual life, my spiritual practices, and my connection to Unitarian Universalism. This year, we focused on the sources of Unitarian Universalism, including our heritage, varying theologies, and prophetic voices, new and old. We also looked at other world religions and talked about universal topics like forgiveness, joy, and the possibility of an afterlife, among other things. Each week, we discussed how our spiritual practices were going and checked in about what was going on in our lives and spirits. We were a small but mighty group and became a great support for one another. While it is not unusual to have an intelligent conversation with a fellow church member or a spiritual one, the combination of the two is sort of a rare event in my experience as a UU. Wellspring provided a format for that very type of discussion. Discussing these topics in a safe circle of trust with open and honest individuals who are dedicated to creating a safe space to explore, share, and even challenge one another made it something that I looked forward to. I have two favorite sessions that I would like to tell you about. One was the discussion of an afterlife, and the other was a discussion about earth-based traditions. I hadn't spent a lot of time in my life thinking about my views about the afterlife. I just knew that I did not believe in heaven and hell as I learned about it in my Christian upbringing. The conversation we had, however, led me to identify and articulate some of my beliefs. I believe that people are and live on in our memories, places and things that remind us of the person who is gone. They live on in the changes of the seasons and in the imagery of nature. Maybe we even experience feeling that person's spirit at times. It is the great mystery of mysteries, what happens to our souls when we die. And while I remain uncertain, I now have shaped a belief that feels right to me. During our discussion of earth-centered traditions, I was particularly impacted by a YouTube video we watched of a Native American man who was one of the first in his tribe to be college educated. Shortly after his graduation, he returned home, and his uncle invited him to go fishing. While fishing, his uncle asked him what he learned while away at college. Oren enthusiastically shared many of the things he learned and experienced at university with his uncle. They were vastly different experiences than those of his life on the reservation. Finally, the uncle asked Oren to look at a branch growing out of the side of a cliff. He said, "Do you see that young tree? You see how it's holding onto the earth? That's how you are. We are dependent. We are rooted. We are part of the earth. We are the same as that tree. You are the same. You need water. You need light. You are dependent. Without the earth, you would not be here." Oren shared in the video that he learned more in that boat in a couple of hours, instructed by a man who never went beyond the 5th grade, than he did in his 4 years of university. His reflection really made me think of my own connection to nature. I had never thought so deeply before about how dependent I truly am on the earth, and that to notice nature, protect it, and have reverence for it need to be part of my daily spiritual practices. Today, that manifests itself in walks outside, planting flowers, and saying thank you as often as I can to the sky, the trees, the lake, and for the food that I eat. Each of these sessions help me to ponder and shape my spirituality and my connection to all that is. I have come away from the Wellspring experience feeling more rooted in my faith and to find deeper meaning in how the sources of Unitarian Universalism impact the way we worship and why.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Cross Dunham. The invitation to become a member of the Wellspring experience at First Church came at a very beneficial time for me. I'd moved to Milwaukee in October of 2020 with the intention to reset my life in ways I hadn't fully defined yet. Part of that reset involved joining First Church. Over the course of 40 plus years, I'd sometimes attended services at a variety of UU churches. And while I had a general understanding of the UU approach to theology and to living in this human world, I welcomed the opportunity to go deeper into that understanding with Wellspring. So in the summer of 2021, I took a leap of faith and accepted Diane Horn's invitation to join what we sometimes refer to as our small but mighty group of participants of the inaugural class of UU Wellspring at First Church. The Wellspring engagement of participants in the 6 UU sources, which Reverend Dina has listed and described briefly, is to approach the topics at 3 different levels: head, heart, and hand. The head approach provides solid literature grounded in UU history and world theology, among other topics. At the heart level, participants are encouraged to go deeper into core spiritual themes and to examine topics like vulnerability, forgiveness, and joy. The hands component is the so what component of Wellspring. Participants are engaged to reflect on how embracing each source might change the way we live our lives in ways both big and small. For a number of years now, since my retirement from academia, I have sometimes referred to myself as a recovering academic. I've come to recognize that over the course of my life, I have tended to prioritize rationality and thinking with their promise of perfect solutions to life's questions over matters of the heart. So my academic tendencies have certainly appreciated the head portions of the Wellspring curriculum. Literature focused on such topics as the history of the UU Church, biographies of some UU prophetic voices, and on the fundamental beliefs and practices of many of the world's religions. I did really like all that historical and comparative literature. But the Wellspring approach focuses on much more than just this head stuff that I find so appealing. Instead, the program guides participants to go much deeper in their understanding of life's complexities. For example, at the level of heart, one reading that I found very appealing and which opened up the program was the book A Hidden Wholeness by Parker Palmer. In the opening chapter, Palmer writes, "We humans are cursed with the blessing of consciousness and choice, a two-edged sword that both divides us and can help us become whole. But choosing wholeness, which sounds like a good thing, turns out to be risky business, making us vulnerable in ways we might prefer to avoid. Palmer goes on to say, wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing brokenness as an integral part of life. Believe me, I have worked hard to take Palmer's advice about wholeness, that risky business, to heart, and to strive to embrace brokenness, both in my own life and in the world as it is, as an integral part of human existence. Finally, when I reflect on the hands or so what component of Wellspring, I think about the wonderful discussions that our small but mighty group had at each meeting. I was always struck by the integrity and generosity of spirit group members brought forward as we discussed such weighty topics as our own spiritual backgrounds, forgiveness, joy, and our thoughts about death and the afterlife. No matter what mood I was in at the start of each meeting, I always left with a feeling of gratitude that I had spent the last 2 hours with such thoughtful, open-hearted people. Thank you.
Dear ones, I'll leave you with these closing words by Arthur Foote. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our wills and love of truth forever guide us. May it be so.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will.